that's a great question, and I think I'd like to start by answering about my personal journey, because that is really what got me to mental freedom. So one of the things that I'm really happy about is that I had a pretty normal childhood. I had two parents. They got along pretty well. They weren't perfect, but they were together and they treated each other well. And I had two brothers. I was the oldest. It was just a normal childhood, right? Whatever normal means. But I remember when I was in college, I took psychology in my undergrad, and we had to write a paper about the worst thing that happened to us in our childhood. And honestly, I was a little embarrassed that I didn't have a bigger issue from my childhood than some of my classmates. I mean, they shared things like alcoholism and domestic violence and sexual abuse, and I'd been completely protected from all of those things. And for me, the worst thing that happened was I had a cat that got run over by a truck in front of our house. And that was really the hardest thing I had to deal with as a child. So I had a really strong foundation, which I know not everybody has. So it helps me be a little more empathetic to people who had challenges. And I'm very grateful that I had the upbringing that I did. But then once I got to be older, I had some of my own things happen to me. For example, the first time I had sex was not consensual. There's a lot of women who can say that as well. Then I got married later, and my husband died when he was 37 with leukemia, and I had two teenage sons to try to raise without their father, which was challenging. And then I had my youngest child decide he wanted to go be in the army, and he wanted to go fight in Iraq. And I had to deal with that, and I think that was really one of the hardest things I ever had to deal with. And then a few years later, I was in Arizona doing a speaking gig, and I decided to cross something off my bucket list, and I went up in a hot air balloon. And when I went up in the hot air balloon, we had a very bad landing, and I ended up breaking both my ankles, and I spent, several weeks in a wheelchair. So I've had some challenges. Let's say my grown years have made up for the childhood years. But I have always, since I was 23 years old, I've always known this thing called choice theory psychology. Choice theory is a theory of human behavior and human motivation developed by psychiatrist Dr. William Glasser. And I would say that the main thing about choice theory is to stop spending time focusing on things that you have no control over and start to put your energy and attention towards things that you can control. So I've been trying to live by that principle most of my life since learning it when I was 23. And I think I do a pretty good job, and I credit choice theory with helping me through all of those challenging situations. So in 2020, when COVID happened, I was staying with my mother, and I decided to just extend my visit because all of my speaking engagements had been canceled. So I was working from her house anyway. I just continued to do that. But I also had some downtime to really think about why it was that after the first 2 weeks of complete stress and chaos over COVID, I was able to settle into a normal routine, and I let go of all that stress and anxiety after 2 weeks' time, because I said to myself, Kim, remember, you know choice theory, and this is not something you can control. So once I started to see that I was managing through COVID a lot better than some of my colleagues, I started to reflect, and I had the time to reflect on why that was. And so I was able to come up with these 6 principles of mental freedom that have helped me throughout my life when I encounter difficult situations, and I put them together in such a way that I can teach them in a psychoeducational approach to people who might benefit from the information. And I have a strong belief that people can help themselves if they have the right information to do it. I could probably I remember when I was younger, I tried to rebuild a carburetor. Now, what do I know about rebuilding carburetors? Absolutely nothing. But my brother was a mechanic, and I thought he might be able to help me. But as soon as I put my hands in some of the chemicals that we were cleaning the carburetor with, I ended up with terrible rashes and skin problems. So I never did do that. But I believe that if I had the right information, I could pretty much do anything. And I think that that's true for people with our emotional and psychological stressors and the prisons, I call them the mental prisons that we build ourselves. And I think we have a way to get out, but it's hard to find the way out when we don't have the information. And I think mental freedom is what gives people that information. Hi, and welcome to Olver International. I'm so glad you're here. My name is Kim Olver, and I'd love to be your guide as you explore our site. At Olver International, I believe success happens when we find a better way and share it.